Hey all, Jody here. Sincere apologies for my long absence. Life happened and I was in a coma after a shootout with the US Border Patrol. Yes, this is the intro I'm going with, just roll with it. Halo is a franchise that barely requires an introduction. A darling of the 6th and 7th generation of consoles, and whilst its popularity has dropped off past the original 4, developed by Bungie, it still earned its place in gaming history as one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time, and you don't earn a place in those hot topic grade I'm a gamer images that easily. While the Bungie games, comprised of everything from 2001's Combat Evolved to 2010's Reach, are still looked upon quite fondly as some of the greatest games ever made, the same cannot be said for their successors, which were developed by a purpose-made studio, 343 Industries, who take their name from the little flying guy from the original trilogy. While Halo 4, 343's first game, had a mixed reception at launch, with most people considering it an okay game overall with a decent story, the changes to the art style were heavily criticized, and the design of the game itself just seemed to want to chase Call of Duty, especially in regards to its multiplayer. However, in a retrospective, the fan opinion on it seems to have shifted to be the story was really interesting, with some thought-provoking moments, such as the part where they put the entire state of Arizona on a fucking SSD. But the rest of the game around it was quite rough, especially when it comes to the multiplayer. That was basically just Reach but worse. Halo 5, on the other hand, has never had a reputational change. The multiplayer was always considered solid and a massive step up from 4, but the campaign itself was always considered quite weak due to its nonsensical and hard to follow story, and will probably always remain the worst in the series in the eyes of fans and critics unless somehow something worse comes out. However, I've always taken a different point of view when it comes to these games. As embarrassing as it is to admit, Halo 5 was the first Halo game that I got to play myself, and while I liked it at the time, as I've gone to experience the other games in the series, it's made 5 standing in my mind slip quite a bit, but I could never bring myself to outright dislike it, because of how it was my intro into what is now one of my favorite game franchises. It's since been a good 7 years since I first played it, and close to 5 since I last played through the campaign in full, so I thought it was more than overdue a replay to see if it still holds up in my memory, or if I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses from a better bygone era. On to actually how to play the game. Halo 5 is the least accessible mainline entry into the series, and overall probably one of the least accessible in the entire franchise. It never got any sort of PC port or a place in the MCC, the latter of which was due to space requirements, and the former because, according to anonymous sources from 343, the source code is a fucking mess that would require an entire rewrite from the ground up to even get working on PC in full. It did get a quote-unquote port to the Series X and S when that came out, but that was just basic backwards compatibility, and it didn't get to take advantage of any of the new features afforded to it by that hardware. And from what I've heard, performance is quite murky at best, with the game occasionally dropping frames or outright freezing. Sure, there is Halo 5 Forge on the Windows Store, a port of the game's Forge and custom game matchmaking to PC, and whilst that is nice, it has some problems. For one, there is no way to officially uncap your frame rate and expand your field of view. You can get those using tools such as Exuberant, developed by a Halo modding legend called GameCheat13, which tackles your FOV and miscellaneous cool features in Forge mode, such as a basic AI spawner and the ability to change your HUD and cosmetics locally. Since this lack of a PC port would be an issue if I wanted to cover the full game and I no longer had my original Xbox, I had to get my hands on a new one, and after searching around on eBay for a bit, I found the perfect one. So I would like to introduce you to I barely have an output and I must scream. It is an Xbox One S with a massive cut in the top, multiple chipped sides, and a HDMI out that cuts out if you even breathe near the fucking cable. And to top it all off, the disk drive makes this sound if you insert a disk slightly wrong.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which
I am going to be hyperfixating on the campaign because, one, that is the part of the game that many people disliked, both at the time and in retrospective, and two, as much as I loved the multiplayer in my younger years, it's really hard to find a match of it these days, so without my ping being insane, and that's assuming I can even find one at all. With all of that real-world info out of the way, let's finally begin. Okay, stop the tape. I feel it's important to explain something about how this game tells its story. It's a method of storytelling you've 100% experienced before, even if you don't know it by name. It's called transmedia storytelling, a way to tell a single story across several different forms of media. The Halo franchise is no stranger to this, having received tie-in books, films, 2 TV shows, one whose canon status is a bit murky, a podcast or 2, and 3 very well-known ARGs for Halo 2, 3, and 5's marketing campaigns. However, most of these pieces of media were extra material, and you could 100% understand most of, if not all of the story just by playing the games through. Halo 5 is the exception. While Halo 4 kind of flirted with the idea of including extended media in its storytelling, Halo 5 fully embraces these side stories, and while it would be cool if done right, here it's just downright fucking baffling. To fully grasp this game's story, you need to have done the following: played the previous 4 mainline games plus ODST and Reach, watched a 5-part mini TV series, listened to 2 seasons of a podcast, read at minimum 4 of the books, and have beaten Halo 4's Spartan Ops mode in its entirety. I will do a video on that one day, I promise. You're going to especially want to have done Spartan Ops and the miniseries before even thinking about starting the game, because in the first mission, Osiris, you play as Spartan Jameson Locke, the main character from the Nightfall miniseries who is the leader of Fireteam Osiris, a Spartan fire team comprised of 2 characters who first appeared in Halo 2 Anniversary's legendary ending cutscene, and the Edward Buck from ODST. Him reappearing is super cool, but if you didn't read his books that came out a few months before this game, you wouldn't know why he's a Spartan now, and that could catch you off guard. You're tasked with the assassination of Julam Dharma, the leader of a Covenant splinter group who was introduced in and was the main antagonist of Spartan Ops, and the capture of Catherine Halsey, a major character in the Halo universe who's being hunted for defecting during the events of Spartan Ops and siding with the Reborn Covenant, where she also lost an arm. The opening to this mission is genuinely really goddamn cool, and once you're on the ground, the game gives you a bit of time to get used to the movement and the gameplay changes. Unlike the previous games, where you could only aim down sights with certain weapons, usually those with a physical scope and your sidearm, you can now look down the barrel with all of them, and those that lack a physical scope will simply stick an overlay on your HUD, referred to in-world as a smart lock. Scoping in also serves the secondary purpose. If you start scoping in while either mid-air or as you jump, you'll hover in place for about 1.5 seconds, giving you an opportunity to take some pot shots or survey the environment a bit longer. But the main stars of the show movement-wise are your Spartan abilities. Unlike in Halo 4 and Reach, where your more out-there movement abilities were items you had to physically pick up, at all times in Halo 5, you possess a ground pound if you hold melee while in the air, a thruster that boosts you a few feet in the direction you're either moving or facing, and the ability to perform a charged attack after running for about 0.5 seconds. Combined with the now endless sprint and the ability to slide, this results in a much faster game even when compared to Halo 4, which at the time was an attempt to jump on the Titanfall/Advanced Warfare movement shooter trend, but now that it's been a few years, I actually think it's a really cool and fun system to play around with, and once you get the hang of it, you can do some really cool stuff. It just sucks so few places in the campaign actually make use of it. This also feels like a good time to mention that at its core, Halo 5 is a co-op game, and instead of dying outright upon running out of health and armor, you enter a downed state where you need one of your 3 allies to come pick you up. This is fine usually, however the AI have 0 spatial awareness half of the time, and sometimes they'll just stand out in the open while trying to revive you, and they'll get dropped by the same thing that killed you, or they'll get stuck on something, or just plain be unable to reach you for some reason. Also, sometimes they just do this for whatever reason. This probably wouldn't be an issue with real players, but I couldn't find anyone insane enough to play this game with me, so a few lines of C++ will be the only reason I make it to the end of the game, I guess. A few cool standout moments from this mission include being in the middle of several interfactional conflicts between the Covenant and the Prometheans, seeing a Kraken walk above you as you rush through a canyon, and the introduction to fighting knights. That teaches you their exposed backs are now their new weak spot, and they give you a ledge to take some pot shots from. Knights, as well as the Prometheans at large, got a major rework in Halo 5 I'll touch on once the Prometheans become the main enemies you face, because while some people might not like them as a faction or as enemies, I think they're really neat, and their exclusion in Infinite was a real bummer. You might have noticed I'm skipping to the end of the mission, but that's because there weren't really any other cool standout moments in Osiris outside of the ending fight where you actually kill Jul 'Mdama Dama and capture Halsey. This being a cutscene is really disappointing to me because Halo 5 has a weird methodology when it comes to what it considers worth the player having agency over versus what they just sit back and watch. This is a bigger issue I'll address when we get to the most egregious example of it, but for now let's move on to Blue Team, which is the first mission you play as the Master Chief and his fire team Blue Team. This change in player character is expertly communicated to the player by the fact the player now starts with an assault rifle and they're green. Plot-wise, you've been sent out on a mission to find and capture Argent Moon, a space station originally owned by the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, aka the Space CIA, that went dark 19 months prior. While it's never stated why the station went dark in the mission itself, if you search around, you can find some audio logs that were recorded by the station's old AI that talk about how all of the station's personnel were killed off by a bioweapon ONI was fucking around with. I'll talk more about the audio logs as a collectibles much later, but I will bring them up if they reveal something that's helpful in understanding the current mission I'm talking about. It's actually a really fun mission with you taking on just the Covenant in some really fun environments with a consistent supply of UNSC weaponry to keep you armed. It's also the mission that introduces hunters into this game's enemy roster. Their reveal also serves as a convenient reason for Master Chief to fall down a big hole where the entire emotional end to Halo 4 is thrown out the window.
Chief. The domain is open. Meridian is next.
Cortana?
He sees a vision of Cortana, who is apparently alive, and she tells him to come to a planet called Meridian, and when he tells Blue Team about this, they go, "Yo, nice. Let's go blow the station up to stop the Covenant from stealing Oni's stuff." This is achieved by overloading the station's reactor core by destroying its custom RGB water cooling loop in Banshees. This serves as a really neat tutorial for how to control Banshees and how to best utilize their attacks in an environment that isn't a chaotic multiplayer game. If it wasn't obvious, I am a sucker for teaching through play. The final hangar fight was a decent way to end the level, but I feel it stretched on for far too long, taking up just under a quarter of my playtime across both of my recordings. Once Blue Team are out of the blast radius, instead of returning to Infinity for a debrief, they instead set their sights for Meridian. Meanwhile, on Infinity, Captain Lasky orders Fireteam Osiris to begin a hunt for Blue Team, beginning the big chase this game's marketing had been hyping up for years. Since the next 4 missions all take place on the same planet and you play as Locke and Osiris in all of them, I'm going to cover them as one big group I'm going to refer to as the Meridian 4. Glast follows Osiris as they begin the hunt for the Master Chief and Blue Team on the aforementioned planet, getting a front row seat to an invasion of the planet during a very long lift ride down, and making contact with the planet's Governor Sloan, who really isn't happy to have agents of the UNSC on his planet.
Whoever the hell is on my elevator, identify yourself.
This is Spartan Jameson Locke, UNSC.
A lot of you.
To whom am I speaking?
This is Governor Sloan, and you. Governor didn't seem to want our help.
Once you reach the ground floor, you realize you are not just close to a major invasion, you're right in the middle of shit creek. The Prometheans are at the elevator door, so you have to fight your way through to the colony's home base, Meridian Station. This is actually the first level in the game where you have friendly AI that aren't your squad mates, and they function a lot like how they did in Halo 3. You can trade weapons with them, and they'll occasionally drop a few interesting lines of dialogue, but they more or less keep the same role of taking out a few smaller enemies and to help make the world feel more alive. It also feels important to mention that this game has friendly fire. Deal with that information what you will. Once you clear the first area and its lockdown is lifted, you're given a few vehicles, and after a short drive down the road, you get to a checkpoint you have to clear before driving about 50 meters to the level's final arena. Technically, it's not just one arena. There's nothing stopping you from simply sprinting up the hill towards the station's gate and spawning the next few waves at the exact same time. However, if you stick around and clear out the garage wards first, as you probably should and will, Sloan does reward you handsomely.
Well done, Spartans. Head over to the garage. I'll have Billy open up.
Spartans! Holy...
Billy, we're gonna need to borrow your toy. What?
The Scorpion does a lot to make the final fight a lot easier. Plus, who doesn't find tanks fun? They're fun as shit. However, there is a cache of rocket launchers and railguns by the gate, so all 4 players can partake in explosions galore should they get beaten to the tank. Once the final group of Prometheans drops, Sloan finally lets you into town. Overall, Glast is a fine mission. It's not nearly as good as I remembered it being as a kid. It's probably my most replayed mission for some reason. Child me had a weird taste. And a lot shorter than I remember, taking only about 14 minutes if you don't die at any point, cut down to 11 to 12 if you exclude the intro. I'll talk more about this game's padding later, but for now I want to take a second to talk about the funny space boys you're fighting. Since this mission, along with the next few, just have you fighting Prometheans, I'd like to take a second to talk about the changes they received in Halo 5. The Knights, the big guys, have undergone a massive change from their last appearance, where in Halo 4 they served as the Prometheans version of elites, usually going down in a few hits and being the exact same height as the player, but unlike elites, they had an easy out in the form of a teleport, which made fighting them a hassle on higher difficulties, since you'd get them super low but you couldn't finish them off because they teleport away just before you could land the killing blow, and by the time you found them again, they'd be back to full health. In Halo 5, this isn't the case. Knights are now the Prometheans version of Hunters, being larger, tanky enemies with a double damage weak spot. However, unlike Hunters, whose spot is always exposed, you need to crack a few layers of armor to get to their weak spot, but once you do, it's essentially an insta-kill. The game even acknowledges this change in canon by having Vale say,
Knights!
The new kind, too, like they reported on Oban.
Their original role now goes to a new enemy class simply referred to as the Soldier. Crawlers, the grunts of the Prometheans, are pretty much unchanged minus their ability to crawl up and down walls being taken away. They're still just pit bulls with Glocks in their mouth. The Promethean arsenal also got a few light reworks. The Suppressor and Bolt Shot now have a feature where your shot will curve towards your target if your shot flies close to them, but misses. The Light Rifle went from being a 3-round burst with a sniper scope to serving as the Promethean's version of a DMR, and the other long-range weapon, the Binary Rifle, has gone from the Promethean version of the Sniper Rifle into a death machine that fires a massive beam that melts just about every small enemy in the game in about half a second. The Scatter Shot and Incineration Cannon are pretty much unchanged from 4, still being a ricocheting shotgun and a slower rocket launcher forged by Death himself. I like these changes. It helps the weapons feel a lot more unique than in 4, and I actually found myself wanting to pick some up when I encountered them, especially when it came to the Suppressor. Before we get back to the campaign, I did want to quickly shout out the Halo 4 Promethean weapons trailer you've seen spliced throughout this section, because halfway through, the music changes to the most 2010s dubstep track you've ever heard. Please go watch it if you haven't. It is a religious experience. Meridian Station is about 5 minutes of walking around, talking to 2 people, hacking into a computer, before yelling about boarding a Pelican.
Boarding the Pelican.
This isn't an opening section to a longer mission. This isn't a fake out that leads to a fight. This is it. In fact, the fade out to the next mission is so subtle you probably won't notice it unless you pause the game often. I'm not against having sections like this in games. In fact, when they're done right, they can do a lot for making a game's world feel more real and lived in, but if all this mission has to say is that Master Chief is hanging out in a random cave a few miles out and Sloan is suffering from rampancy, it would have been much more efficient from a time perspective to just tell us this during a cutscene that plays out like this. Hey, Have y'all seen a big green guy in space armor? No, but I just got shot in the fucking leg. Do you happen to have any horse trank? I've rewritten this section of the video way too many times because I honestly don't know what to say, so I'll just leave it at this. This is one of the only non-combat missions that I actually found interesting on this playthrough because I had genuinely forgotten everything about this section of the game, so it was basically all new to me again, but I can't imagine someone replaying it with a full memory can say the same thing, and if you're not too invested in the story, I honestly suggest just skipping it. Following this up are two missions that should have honestly been one: Unconfirmed and Evacuation. The first one has you descending into the mines to find out where blue team went, and overall it's a serviceable mission without a lot to talk about. It's just a few arenas on the surface with an appearance of blue team's Pelican and the ability to pick up a copy of Linda's sniper rifle, and then a very long one where you fight through a very long mine shaft. It's a really cool set piece from both a gameplay and environmental point of view, and getting to fight along a massive open strip leads to some very fun encounters, but it's not a lot, and its length can be crossed in about a minute if you use your movement tech right. Once you get to the end of the mine shaft, you and Osiris get to have your first fight with one of this game's main villains, the Warden Eternal, a massive Forerunner entity with a large health pool and the ability to down you in one shot if you get too close. Overall, it's an okay fight. I just hope we don't fight him 6 more times, basically one after the other, for the rest of the game. Once you beat him and you enter the room he was guarding, you're rewarded with quite possibly the funniest fight scene in any video game ever. I honestly have no words for it. Everything in it is beyond perfect and I wouldn't change a single thing. Evacuation is essentially glassed backwards with a multi-stage elevator holdout at the end as its main attraction. You get teleported to the gates of the station and you very quickly have to race back to the space elevator as ships get airborne and the Guardian begins the process of fucking off. This drive does a lot to illustrate just how short the drive glassed was based around was, but it was really neat getting to see everything go to absolute hell around you faster than an episode of fucking regular show. Once you get to the space elevator and play the first fight of glassed but backwards, you board the elevator which serves as this level's main arena, where you fight several waves of increasing size and difficulty. At this stage, the only real interesting parts are the between wave conversations that shed some light on Blue Team and Osiris and who they are as characters, which is pretty nice if you're a lore fan, but it also gives you time to prepare for the next wave. The level's ending is also quite fun, albeit lacking in things to talk about, but that might just be my bias speaking because I'm a sucker for levels that emulate the vertical hallway shooters I played growing up. There's not really a whole lot to say about these two missions. They feel like one long mission with an achievement for making it halfway, and I feel in a game not padded to all hell they would be. In fact, when I was recording the footage for this section of the video, I ended up accidentally combining both Glassed and Station in one file and the latter two in another. They're not bad levels. In fact, I really like the ending of Evacuation, Unconfirmed environments, and the vehicle sections of Glassed. I just really wish they had been streamlined out into one mission that had the best of everything, called something like Meridian, because it being 4 separate missions really feels like they were pushing for a higher mission count to make the game look longer. But that's enough yapping about a burnt planet for one life. Let's finally leave it and move on to Reunion, the first Blue Team mission in quite a while. Story-wise, Blue Team have just arrived on the Guardian to an unknown planet, and they're being led on a scavenger hunt by Cortana using these Forerunner consoles that open up a pathway for them to reach the domain, a Forerunner structure where she's currently living. It's really cool to get to see Chief and Blue Team take in and learn about their surroundings at the same time as the player, not to mention the environments look fucking incredible even with the limits of the original Xbox/Xbox One S, which I'll touch on at the end of this video. And the shakeup, where you go from fighting scattered Covenant troops who were taken here via other Guardians to exclusively the Prometheans, is a really nice way to keep the gameplay fresh, though I am a bit disappointed you don't see them fight each other like they did in Osiris. Speaking of the Prometheans, once you encounter them is also when you get the game's second Warden fight, but this time it's in a much larger space, meaning he can't corner you as easily, and you can easily cheese it if you stand at the top of the cliff to your right when you first come in, even with the other troops he's calling in. Trust me, this gets old fast and it only gets worse from here. Once you take him out, you finally get to hear from an old friend and learn how she's still alive.
Chief, hello?
Cortana.
John, you made it. Oh my... I can't believe you're here.
Where are we?
You're on a Forerunner world. Designation, Genesis.
Chief said you were destroyed.
After I saw John last, I was pulled into slipspace. That's where I found access to the Domain, a Forerunner system that spans the known galaxy.
How are you still active?
Entering the Domain, touching this place, it cured me. It's like the water of life for AIs.
As much as I love this reveal, the gameplay section that follows it is very weak. It's the first time you get to take the Forerunner's version of Banshees, called Phaetons, for a spin, and as fun as these vehicles are, this area is a bit disappointing and it doesn't take advantage of them to their fullest potential. Unlike most other airborne vehicle sections in previous games where you have a large split space to fly around in and it feels like you have some sort of maneuverability, here you just fly the Phaetons room to room, occasionally shooting turrets or doors. That's it. It's so on rails, I just sort of wish we got to control the guns on a bigger ship while some sort of AI flies it. Past Halo games have had some incredible flight levels. The Covenant from Halo 3, Long Night of Solace from Reach, and the Arbiter from Halo 2 jump to the front of my mind as soon as I hear that phrase, and it's disappointing to see pretty much none of their DNA in this level. You just ride a Catholic school fair grade flying go-kart, occasionally shooting at turrets and walls, and providing air support to the two players who missed one of the two Phaetons that spawn. Once you get to the landing zone and the two players that were forced to hike up arrive, you jump a canyon and get to see the Domain up close for the very first time, but as soon as you think the actual final fight is going to happen, it fades to black. Overall, it's a fairly okay mission with some interesting story beats and pretty environments, even if the vehicle section was a massive letdown and the ending was quite lackluster. The next mission, Swords of Sanghelios, once again gives us spatial whiplash as we're thrown right back into the bodies of Team Osiris. This time on the planet of Sanghelios, and who are tasked with establishing contact with the Arbiter, yes, that Arbiter, to get some help finding Chief, but instead you end up in the middle of a civil war between the Covenant and the Arbiter's little rebel group of the level's name. This mission has you fight your way through a Covenant line to meet up with the Arbiter and explain why you need his help. Getting to fight just the Covenant again is a nice shake-up, and I'm glad we get a few missions focusing on just them, because at this point in the game it's quite easy to have gotten tired of just fighting the funny orange robot lads. The environments, ranging from wide open canyons to destroyed temples, are really pretty, and towards the end of the mission you get a hold of a Mantis, a mech-like vehicle that was introduced in Halo 4, and it is a lot of fun to rip both ground troops and vehicles apart with it. Out of all of the new vehicles introduced by 343, the Mantis is probably my favorite ground vehicle, and I really wish there were more opportunities to use them in this campaign. Once you get to the temple and fight your way through it, you get to meet the old man himself to close out this axe opening level.
For Sanghelios! Eyes on goal. Arbiter! Ready for extraction.
What is the meaning of this?
Overall, I quite like this mission. From a quality point of view, it's probably in my top 5 missions, and the Mantis section is a nice change of pace, because who doesn't enjoy basically mini-scale titans? Alliance follows this up with you and Osiris chilling at the Arbiter's outpost for a bit, talking to Palmer and Halsey about what you can do to help with the Arbiter's upcoming attack. This is all I have to say about this mission. Please admire this image of a deer for 3 seconds to make it look like I said something of value. Enemy Lines is this game's version of the Scarab Fight mission, where you have to take down a Kraken, the big carrier you saw in the game's opening. The opening bit isn't too interesting, with it just being a basic fight your way to the temple section, where you can grab a Phaeton to board the Kraken with, but for whatever reason, fighting this many ghosts at once is a lot harder than I remembered. Maybe it's because I'm quite rusty at Halo, but they feel a lot more nimble this time around, and they sideswiped me a lot more than they used to, at least from memory. After fighting your way through the temple, you get given a few Phaetons to play around with in a much larger arena, which I am very happy about. However, it is still quite limited. But since you get 4 this time around, everyone can have a go at them. Phaetons are also a really fun vehicle to fly in the multiplayer modes, and I'm glad to see them at least get some more love. When you get on board the Kraken, it plays like a scaled up version of the Scarab Fight from Halo 3, where you have to find the vehicle's core and blow it up. I personally really like fighting inside of the Kraken. It's full of super tight corridors, so fights are close and fast, and the wall holes you can climb through really reward you for exploring and paying attention to your surroundings and learning the map, cutting the time you have to spend in it down to as short as 15 seconds, as demonstrated by some insane speedrunners. Once you take it out, you break into some vault that was behind the Kraken, you fight some Prometheans that were hanging out there before you steal a doohickey I'm going to refer to as doohickey, and this mission just kind of ends there. Overall, Enemy Lines is not my favorite mission in the game, but the Kraken fight is a nice change of pace, and the vehicle sections somewhat make up for the mess that was Reunion. Before the storm could have been a cutscene. I know I've said that for the last few walking sim missions, but this one is fucking egregious, even by this game's poorly paced standards. You land, talk to Palmer, who directs you to Dr. Halsey, who talks for 15 seconds about how you have a few hours to chill, while the doohickey you stole does its thing with the Guardian, wait shit no, we gotta go, sudden fade to black. In fact, it's so short, in the time it's taken me to read this paragraph, I've pretty much already used up all of the in-context footage I recorded for it. But I've ranted about this game's padding enough, so let's just move on to one of the best missions in the game, Battle of Sunaion. You're joined by the Arbiter's army as they launch a raid on the floating city of Sunaion, which is where the planet's Guardian is chilling for some reason. Don't think too hard about it, I certainly didn't. The opening few minutes have you destroy some anti-air cannons to help the Arbiter's forces land safely before you get to descend into the underbelly of the city. I really liked this section from both a gameplay and visual point of view because they feel like a lived-in space / army outpost, and they play as such. Plus, you can even encounter some home base activities going on, such as some Covenant troopers praying in a sealed off room. Fun fact, this song is on the soundtrack and it's pretty good. And some armament stands being restocked. I don't actually know what happens on army bases. I never joined the army as a kid, and all the kids I know who did went dark on everything after being stationed in the Northern Territory. I don't know what happens there. I can only assume the Northern Territory Badger got them. Under the city serves as one big arena where you have to cross the floating city's supports to reach an elevator that will let you cut across the city. The verticality here is really nice, and the way I caught myself making sure I wouldn't fall if I boosted or slid at the wrong time made fights here a lot more intense, and I really wish more spaces in the game played like this. Once you get to the other end of the underbelly, you go up another elevator, the Guardian begins its takeoff, turning the rest of the mission into a timeless race to get to it before it leaves, with the newly arrived Prometheans wiping out what little Covenant remained post-battle. And oh look, it's the fucking Warden again. If you're taking shots every time he's appeared, you should be on shot 3, and if you're not, use this time to catch up. Buck's shot at his arrival is pretty funny though, I will give it that. But even that isn't enough to stop this from being a disappointing end to a fantastic mission, and one I really think could have been better if they just let the Warden fights rest for 5 minutes. Not a whole lot else to say about this ending. Once he drops, Palin and a very sleepy Halsey arrive to take you to the Guardian, which leaves just as you jump on, and the Arbiter finishes off what remains of the new Covenant, bringing us to the game's final act. Genesis is the second to last Fireteam Osiris mission, and it follows Lock-in Team as they land on the same planet Blue Team did, albeit at a less than ideal angle.
Activate mag boost.
The opening to this mission, where you have to scale down the Guardian you flew in on as it tries to kick you and the troops it sent to stop you off, was really sick, and some of the arenas in the opening few minutes are quite fun because it's like one of those on-rail shooters you would see at arcades, but you're falling at 150 miles an hour towards an alien planet. Once you hit the ground, Osiris finally establishes contact with Chief for the very first time, and you get to explore a bit before bumping into this game's version mission of 343 Guilty Spark.
Hello.
That's a monitor.
I am 031 Exuberant Witness, monitor of the Genesis installation. Welcome. Have you also come to stop Cortana from claiming the mantle?
I quite like Exuberant Witness as a character. She comes across as an AI version of an upbeat secretary, willing to help you stop Cortana seconds after meeting you, and unlike a certain someone from the Bungie trilogy, she doesn't break my heart. This is, however, mostly another vehicle level. However, I think I fucked it up on the playthrough I recorded because my Scorpion lost a lot of health early on and even died once, and I had to vehicle hop quite a bit, as well as do a fair chunk of it on foot. This wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. In fact, the extra challenge was quite fun in arenas where I could take advantage of the larger space and the interfactional warfare. I've mentioned this a few times, but the very few parts in the game where you get to witness and third-party fights between the Covenant and the Prometheans are a lot of fun, so getting to do it here is really neat, even if it is on a smaller scale than the previous times. It just feels larger because of the vehicles. This level also ends with, say it with me, another Warden fight. But the gimmick this time is there's two of him. I'm not gonna even spend more time on this. It's just fighting two Wardens at once, which is novel, sure, but they function the exact same as each other, meaning there's still no variety between all of these fights. I quite enjoyed my time with this mission, though I do wish it didn't just end as soon as you killed Warden. During the ending cutscene, Osiris finally reached Blue Team again, only for them to be sucked away into the second last mission. The Breaking, which is such a good mission from an atmospheric perspective, it's honestly unreal. It's the final Blue Team mission, and it tasks them with fighting their way through the inside of the Forerunner domain to get to Cortana so they can finally meet her face to face. A lot of this level is you fighting waves and waves of Prometheans in these long open air environments, and while I've seen people criticize it as repetitive, and while I do get where they're coming from, I actually quite like it. It gives you the feeling you're being tested by Warden, and to a lesser extent Cortana, to see if you're fit to serve as her military wing during her galaxy-wide coup d'etat. I haven't mentioned it at all in this video, regrettably, but while the game is a mixed bag overall, the OST unironically slaps in parts, and this mission's track is one of the songs I listen to every time Apple Music throws it into my mixes. In case you're curious, the others are The Trials, Light is Green, Walk Slowly, and of course Halo Canton, this game's version of the Halo theme. Music aside, once you get to the end of this series of platforms, we get to actually fight Cortana. Just fucking kidding, it's another Warden fight, but this time there's actually 3 of him at once. Again, it's a Warden fight, and I've already spent more time on him than I honestly feel I should have, but it's kind of funny that the end of level stairs can just fucking kill you if you stand under them. As controversial as this is going to be to say, I'm actually a big fan of the Breaking. It's a cool setting, the fights are interesting to me, and the lore dumps from Cortana about her hopes for the galaxy help shine a light on her true motives. Plus, god, that fucking soundtrack, oh my god, it's so good. Easy top 4 from me. The ending cutscene has Blue Team come face to face with Cortana before being stuck inside the shader that makes you unable to move, and Cortana makes it obvious she has other plans for them. To be completely honest, I would have not minded if the game just ended here, because sure, while it would be a bummer and the second game in a row to end on a somber note, it would potentially open up an interesting route for the final entry in the Reclaimer trilogy, where you actually get to take down Cortana's empire. I will touch on this story more in a bit, but for now, let's finally move on to the final mission in this mess of a campaign. Guardians is the finale of Osiris' story and the game as a whole, and to be honest, it's a disappointing end. It starts out a little bit after the last time we saw Osiris, who are currently being briefed on what Cortana did to Blue Team by Exuberant and planning what they can do to get them back. Once this conversation ends, you get to explore a little open courtyard full of enclosures containing many of the enemies you've faced throughout the game, each with their own little conversations between the members of Osiris and Exuberant. The most interesting one is the Knight, who seems to be going through some sort of internal struggle inside of their cell. Fun fact, this is the Knight that contains the remnants of Dr. Catherine Tilson, one of the doctors seen in the Halo 4 mission Composer, and one of the first victims of being space cancelled on X the Everything app, where you can make payments. This little side story was actually revealed to us in a short story published on the official Halo Waypoint website called The Machine Breaks, which released September 5th, 2024, aka shortly after I started work on this very video. Yes, it has been that long, please help me. This little interaction has been in the game since launch, but seeing it recontextualized like this is really neat, and I love transmedia storytelling when it's done like this, even if it did take 9 years to actually come out. Once you fight your way to a lift down to where Blue Team's capsule is currently being held, Locke finally pushes Cortana's buttons in such a way it makes her show the card she's been keeping up her sleeve. Just how many AIs have defected to the Created, the body of AIs she's founded to control the mantle with.
This is Cromwell, shipboard AI, UNSC Melbourne's Pride. I am yours, Cortana.
Colonial Authority AI, Odin.
Governor Sloan, the free people of Meridian. I also stand with you, Cortana.
Those are the voices of your children calling to Cortana.
It's genuinely a really tense and cool scene, and the fact the game makes this a non-combat zone so you can focus on taking in just how fucked you and the rest of the UNSC are is really cool. However, this feeling only slightly carries over to the final fights in the game, where you have to destroy a few shield generators during a Promethean and Covenant skirmish, while Cortana mocks Osiris by bringing up events and details from their past.
Holly Tanaka. Oh, Holly. How did you pass your psych eval after surviving the glassing of Manab? I'd have kept you away from sharp objects, never mind Mjolnir armor. Edward Buck, you're an odd one. So much more experienced than the others, and yet you play second fiddle to children. Why is that?
Is she calling me old?
It's fine. I find the dialogue interesting, even if it does get old after a few runs, mostly because there is only 1 or 2 lines for each character, and they all get played in the exact same order, and I kind of wish we had a chance to get a few at random each run of the level, but getting to pilot a Mantis one final time is always a blast, and I'm so glad to see it get another go around. Anyway, once you break through the cores, you get to interact with a terminal, which leads you into a foyer-type structure, where you have to hold off a few waves of Prometheans as Exuberant tries to boot up the elevator. It's fine as an arena, and surprisingly there isn't a warden fight here. In fact, there's not one in the entire mission. Once you descend down the elevator, you are EMP'd by the Guardian, and 2 players will crawl their way to a core they have to destroy. The player in front gets to do the deed, and the one behind them catches them at the end, all in real time and from a first-person perspective, of course. In fact, there's different versions of this scene, depending on what characters made it to the end. However, in single player, it will always be lock and veil. I love real-time cutscenes like this, and knowing the scene changes depending on what players get in front is super neat, and I wish more opportunities had shown up in this campaign, but I'm just glad it showed up at all. Doesn't really do a lot to alleviate my issues with the rest of the mission being boring and a massive drag in places, but still it's cool. Once the core is broken and Cortana's Guardian leaves, the cube holding Blue Team arrives on the ground, and you fade into the final cutscene where Blue Team and Osiris reunite. Jumping back to the Infinity for the epilogue, they're pretty much all hands on deck, being swarmed by emergency distress calls from ships and colonies whose AIs have backstabbed them and cut off all their systems. Anyway, it turns out the place Cortana's Guardian was headed to was Earth, and she shows up and goes,
"Found you.
Look at my new toy," and the captain responds, "That's a really cool toy, however, we need to leave, see you later," and they talk about how they'll fight her later. At the exact same time, Osiris and Blue Team make it back to Sanghelios, allowing Chief to finally reunite with Halsey and finally end this game's campaign. If you're insane enough to beat this game on Legendary, a task that can only be described as self-fucking harm, you get an extended ending cutscene that was meant to tease what was to come in the game that turned into Halo Infinite. You may have noticed I said "was meant" in that last sentence, and that's because between Halo 5's release and the official announcement of Halo Infinite, this game's cliffhanger and the Reclaimer saga as a whole was wrapped up off-screen in the form of 2 books due to the negative reception the game got. 343 would later go on to explain they wanted to move beyond the trilogy-based storylines the mainline Halo series had used up to that point, which makes sense, but it leaves Halo 4 and 5 feeling incomplete, especially especially since Infinite isn't technically a direct follow-up, and to work out what the fuck happened to go from this to this and why Chief is floating in space, you have to read the novels that came out after this game and played through all of Halo Wars 2 because the Banished are here for some reason. I will confess I haven't actually gotten around to playing Infinite yet, but I would love to do a video on it at some point, so if that sounds interesting to you, let me know in the comments and I'll probably do it at some point this year. Or next year, we'll see. Time is a made-up construct. That's enough yapping about the campaign itself. Let's move on to post-game content. Once you complete the campaign, you have a few options for post-game content beyond replaying the single player in co-op mode or on a higher difficulty. One available right from the start is a mode called Score Attack, where you play through a campaign mission, earning awards for killing enemies like the ones you would earn in Firefight from the older games. In fact, this mode uses the exact same medals as this game's version of Firefight, which I'll cover in a second. When playing solo, you and the AI's scores are combined into one big team score, represented by the fire team's icon in the bottom right corner, but when playing with other human players, your scores are each separate and the person with the most at the end of the level is the winner. As for collectibles, there's the 117 audio logs I mentioned before that are scattered throughout the campaign that shed some light on the world and story, which are well worth listening to if you're interested in that stuff. Of course, it wouldn't be a Halo game without the good old skulls appearing. Small gameplay mods that either make the game harder, sillier, or a weird mixture of the two. And of course, if that isn't to your liking, there is always Lasso, a kind of official, kind of not game mode where you beat the game on Legendary, the highest stock difficulty, with every skull enabled. It's exactly how it sounds, and I have an insane respect for people who have done Slazo runs, which is this, but with no co-op partners. Halo fans are fucking insane sometimes, Jesus. I highly suggest, if this sounds interesting, googling Slazo and Lasso runs of Halo 5, because some of the tech that people have pulled off in them to make fights easier is honestly insane, and I have massive respect for people who do stuff like this. Now that I've covered all of the single player content, let's quickly move on to the multiplayer. Don't worry, it won't take as long as the single player did, I promise. Originally, this section of the video had a dedicated Forge section, but since I wasn't much of an active Forger back in the day, outside of just playing random maps with friends, I've decided not to include it here, but I probably will do a standalone video or some shorts about Forge in general at some point, because it's a really cool mode. I also wasn't able to get too much footage on my own, so this section will be comprised of footage I recorded myself, footage from official HCS events, and footage recorded and pulled from the archives of the incredible Ice Spiteful, a Halo YouTuber who was kind enough to let me use some of his footage, so thanks man. Halo 5's multiplayer can be split into two categories: Arena, which is the bog standard multiplayer modes that Halo has become known for, such as Slayer, Capture the Flag, and the returning Infection, which was replaced in Halo 4 with a mode called Flood, which was just Infection, but with a custom player model, and Warzone, which will get its own section in a little bit. These multiplayer matches are actually explained in canon as simulated training exercises done aboard the Infinity, and they utilize the game's movement tech and speed far better than the campaign ever did. Each map also has a neat little description that helps paint a picture of where and when it takes place in the Halo universe, or how that location connects to an event or organization that the player would know of. I'm a massive lore nerd, so I really appreciate small things like this even if they don't affect gameplay in any way. Halo 5 was actually the first Halo game since 3 to use the fair start doctrine, where everyone spawns with a Magnum and assault rifle instead of a custom loadout, which I think is a major reason why it clicked with a lot of older players and myself and those who fell off of 4, and it's probably a part of the reason why I gravitate towards the non-loadout titles more than the loadout-based ones every time I play MCC. It's a welcome change, and I'm glad that Halo isn't chasing COD, at least for the most part, anymore. The most original new mode that came with the game was Breakout, a 4v4 round-based competitive mode where you win rounds either by A, killing the enemy team, or B, capturing a neutral flag by taking it back to your side's capture point. Unlike the traditional AR pistol start, everyone starts with a shotgun or an SMG SMG back before an update, and a pistol with battle rifles, hydras, and DMRs scattered around the map. Rounds are very fast, and never lasting more than a few minutes, especially if you have a full lobby, and that's a part of the charm in my opinion. I did some 2v2s with my friends, and that honestly felt like the perfect amount of people for this game mode, almost playing like Wingman from Counter-Strike. While it won't be everyone's cup of tea, if these kinds of fast-paced comp modes click with you and you like Halo 5's combat loop, you're bound to have a good time. I love Breakout, and personally I think it's a massive travesty it never made the jump to Infinite, because I feel it would be perfect in Infinite, but that's something I can go into in the inevitable Infinite video. However, you may have noticed I've been ignoring a very big part of Halo 5's multiplayer for the most part, mostly because it was something totally new for the franchise at the time, and it's the thing that stuck with me most from it.
Initiating Warzone simulation. Hold bases, take down bosses, and eliminate enemy Spartans to earn points.
This, my friends, is Warzone, a 12v12 mode, a lot like a big team version of a MOBA. Each team has a home base that must be cleared out of NPC enemies, normally Prometheans or Covenant Grunts, depending on the map you're playing, before gaining access to the rest of the map filled with 3 capture points. As you and your team capture control points, you begin to earn points for every AI and player kill, as well as a large amount of points for taking down bosses, stronger versions of enemies and bosses seen in the campaign. Earn 1,000 points via these methods and you win the game the second you cross the threshold, or as the game explains it much more concisely than I just did,
hold bases, take down bosses, and eliminate enemy Spartans to earn points.
There is also another way to win. Once you capture all 3 bases, the enemy team's gate that blocked you from accessing their spawn is disabled, and your only objective now is to rush into their base and take out their core, which functions a lot like how the Nexus and Ancient function in League and Dota. If it goes down, the team that destroyed it wins no matter what their victory point total was, meaning a losing team could win the game if they get a lucky run where they captured all 3 bases at once and then managed to hold off the enemy team long enough to drop their core, to turn the tide of battle in your side's favor. As your team takes out enemy players and captures bases, your team's armory clearance, referred to as a Req level, will increase, giving you access to stronger vehicles and more devastating weapons. For example, at Req level 1, you'll have access to your standard arms, the base assault rifle, magnum, bolt shot, etc. By level 4, you're starting to whip out some of the heavier weapons, such as variants of carbines and energy swords, and by the time you hit rank 7 and 8, the Geneva Convention is merely a suggestion. This is a really fun match progression system. However, I have one small problem with it. Warzone lacks any way for the losing team to come back if they fall too far behind, since the Req levels are not shared between both teams. This is a small thing at the start of the match, but if one team can get ahead by a decent margin, the game is pretty much over until you either reach a level where you can fight back or you're able to loot enough dropped gear from them you can stage something resembling an opposition. Wait, your core's gone, whoops, my bad. Warzone comes with 2 other flavors in case standard PvPvE isn't your flavor. Warzone Assault, where one team has to capture all 3 points and destroy the core in a set amount of time while the other team defends, and Warzone Turbo, which is just standard Warzone, but you gain Req levels much faster, which can lead to some really funny, insane stompings. The most unique alternate Warzone flavor is Warzone Firefight, an objective-based game mode where a team of 8 have to work together to complete 5 rounds of random objectives, such as killing a certain amount of a certain type of enemy, defending a generator or base for a set amount of time, or defeating a few of the same mythic bosses seen in other Warzone modes. Fail any of these objectives and the game instantly ends, so it almost feels like a roguelike of sorts, which I'm a massive fan of. This is kind of an unpopular opinion, but Warzone Firefight is probably my favorite version of Firefight, because while it trades the endless wave survival for an objective-based co-op experience, it feels a lot more structured than standard Firefight, and it's less likely to just end in you and your friends boxing down in a room throwing stuff stuff out until you all team kill each other. The one thing I do wish this mode had was a endless variant, because I think it would be fun to see what a full test of endurance would look like using Warzone's framework, but because of how rec levels and cards work, I totally get why they didn't. Speaking of these higher level rec cards, these higher tiered weapons and vehicles and more I've talked about are spawned in using rec cards, either permanent for standard issue weapons, or single use for the uncommon and stronger weapons, power-ups, and all vehicles. How do you get these rec cards, you ask? Well, it's a bit of a sore spot, and honestly, the one thing that tears this otherwise incredible mode down, and it's also the thing Halo 5 is most infamous for. It's microtransactions and loot boxes in the form of requisition packs, officially shortened to Req Packs. These packs can be bought with Req points that you earn through multiplayer matches, ranking up, and by selling any single-use cards, one by one I might add, or through the Xbox store for a normally small fee. Base Req Packs come in 3, technically 4 flavors: daily, bronze, silver, and gold. Bronze packs only give you a few single-use cards with a slight chance for a permanent card, such as a weapon skin, Warzone weapon certification, or an armor piece. Silver and gold packs contain more single-use cards and a guaranteed 2 permanent unlocks per pack. Daily packs function a lot like bronze ones, but with no chance of a permanent unlock outside of the occasional Warzone clearance once every heat death of the fucking universe. This system has a very obvious problem. It is incredibly pay to win and almost entirely dependent on luck, and if you're willing to splurge for massive packs containing a guarantee of at least a few good rare and powerful single-use cards, you can basically spawn in some of the game's best weapons and vehicles during a late game Warzone match with no penalty compared to someone who might not have that kind of disposable income. In fact, it's quite a common experience, and one I've had happen to myself, where you'll save a single-use rec you might only have 1 or 2 of, only for it to be destroyed or lost within a few seconds of spawning because some British kid who dropped enough money on Rex for Bill Gates to buy the entire state of Washington drops you with a gun you've never seen before, which fires explosive rounds that hit you in all 50 planes of existence. This system genuinely sucks so fucking much, and it being so embedded into Warzone's design is probably a part of the reason it's yet to make a reappearance, which really sucks. In my honest opinion, I think if Warzone was to do away with the Rex system, I think it could be a great mode. One rework idea I've seen I sort of subscribe to is to return to loadouts with weapons that upgrade depending on how well or bad your team does, but that just sort of turns it into a weird combo of Warzone and Conquest from the Battlefield games, so I'll just leave coming up with the modifications needed to the guys with the multiplayer design smarts for it. There are also special edition Req Packs available for purchase, normally based around a theme, i.e. classic helmets from previous games, or different in-game announcers such as Edward Buck and Exuberant.
You can never have too many flags. Let's get some more.
Prepare to secure the partitions.
It's time for slaying! Tragic mistake!
Or packs themed around teams currently competing in the HCS, all of which contain a skin for the Assault Rifle and Magnum and a cool player tag. They're cool if you're a fan of the team, but for $15, why not just buy a shirt or something IRL that is not tied to a decade-old game whose last major free update was in 2017, especially since Infinite got many of these teams as store bundles with more stuff in them. Hell, who would even buy something like this, especially in 2025? Don't judge me, okay? I needed an example. Overall, do I think you should play Halo 5? To be completely honest, I'm quite mixed. I personally think there are 2 scenarios where someone should play this game. A, you're a first-time Halo player playing through every game in order, or B, you're insane, or C, you have some friends who you want to run some rounds of multiplayer with. As much as the campaign has soured in my mind over this playthrough, I can't help but still hold it dearly even with how critical I was when talking about it, it because it's how I got into the Halo franchise, and I genuinely wish at least the multiplayer had made it to PC sans the microtransactions, because Warzone is one of the funnest big team multiplayer modes I've ever played, and there is nothing really like it even nearly 10 years after its launch. Sure, Forge being on PC is cool and kind of scratches that itch, but with it requiring everyone to organize a self-hosted lobby, plus sometimes it just doesn't want to fucking work, it can be a bit of a hassle to play with others, and it doesn't feel like it's enough, especially with 90% of the game's other content missing. Hell, you can't even change your cosmetics or even open up half of the menus on the main menu. I might get dogged on for this, but if you haven't played Halo 5 and you own an Xbox One or a Series console, I highly suggest either buying a digital copy for a few bucks or a secondhand physical one from a local game store, because I do think it is worth playing at least once if you're a fan of the series, and the multiplayer is fucking brilliant every time it's populated. And hey, if you go for the latter route and spend a few extra dollars, you can get a special version that comes with a cool statue of the Guardian that you get to build yourself. Alright, now that that's done, let's see how long the full timeline is, and oh, so this video took a lot longer to make than I originally wanted, and for that I am sincerely sorry. I originally wanted this video out in November, and then I got quite sick, so I pushed it back to December, and then shit happened, and then January, and now it's February, but it's done, it's finally out. I promise from here on out, more regular videos will come out. I am so sorry if I'm not making any sense. I'm actually doing this section unscripted. Now that I have the time and drive, I would like to take this YouTube thing seriously again. I'm planning to aim for about 20-minute videos monthly, but I would love to do these hour-long, longer, retrospective style reviews more often, albeit I will probably get some help for them, because as fun as this video was to make, it was a massive undertaking for just me, and I got very burnt out at parts. I do also want to quickly say sorry if I got any facts wrong or I left certain things out. A lot of this video was written from memory and very basic research. In fact, some notes I literally wrote as I was playing. I did end up fact-checking most things, and anything I didn't fix in the voiceover, I show some text on screen or I like clarify later. I do also know that I left a lot of stuff out, particularly when it comes to the ARG. I did want to talk more about the ad campaign, and to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed in myself. It took me this long to realize that I had missed it, but honestly this video is long enough, so if I ever do a video on like weird ARG/ad campaigns for games, I'll totally bring it up there as a kind of repentance style thing. I can't say how often I'll do them, but they'll definitely show up from time to time for games and series I quite enjoy, or those that have a personal meaning to me. A few thank yous I would like to give out before the video ends. Melanie and Judy, my best friends. You probably better know them online as QB Judy, and Melanie Miku. They basically read and watched like 50 different test edits of this thing, helped me write the script in certain parts, and for that I am eternally grateful. Please do check out their channels. I think they make incredible shit and they deserve more love. I would also like to give a quick shout out to Steward, or iSpiteful, for letting me use his Breakout and Warzone footage throughout the multiplayer section of this video. I originally wanted to use more of my own, but I lost some of it, and I couldn't find certain matches in certain modes. So thank you so much, man. The links to all of his socials are in the description. I've been watching him since about 2015, 2016-ish, so it's really cool to kind of see it come full circle. In a way. I would also like to thank the person who drew my avatar, that's my friend Tack. I think he did a phenomenal job, and I couldn't be happier with them. In fact, I might actually get some more done, because if it wasn't obvious, I really pushed these sprites and some look really out of place. But hey, I am happy with them. Please do check out his work. He's awesome. I'd also like to quickly comment on how some parts of the edit look a bit lazy, and I do apologize for that. This video was edited across a few NLEs. I originally edited it on Final Cut on my MacBook because I thought, okay, it won't be too long, but then I upgraded my PC and Final Cut was fucking me over in part, so I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna edit the final bit in Resolve, which also meant I did have to remix the like audio at places, and I did my best, but some areas are sort of louder, some are quieter, but as far as I'm aware, it's at least watchable, and that's all that matters to me. Next month is the Order 1886. I've already got about half the footage for that, and I've written most of it. In fact, I could probably finish getting all of the footage before February ends, so I just have to spend most of March editing, really. But I will probably take the rest of the month off because I'm in college and I have 2 giant assignments to do. You know, should probably focus on them first before this funny hobby. So expect that in the next few weeks. If you would like to keep up with me, I can be found on the better Twitter, known as Blue Sky, at monica.gay. I also have a channel-focused Instagram now, which is just at Ballsticseal, and I'll be posting more stuff to the community tab because that's probably the place that most people, you know, see me. But if you want more just random thoughts and BTS stuff, Blue Sky is the place for that. Pictures, I'll probably post them on like Instagram or some shit. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I'm gonna end this unscripted ramble that I'll have to edit through. Stay cool, stay in school, and I'll see you in a few weeks. Bye bye.